Hi everybody, and welcome back to The Game. Tonight I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into the things that were discussed in my last video. As I said in that short 4-minute video that sat between this video and that video, the longer one, the hour and 17-minute video, I wanted to clarify some language, some words, and I want to discuss those words a little bit and dig deeper and hopefully simpler. See if I can make it more simple. The concepts that were discussed in that video. And I'm going to try to slow things down a little bit and be more concise. Because actually, the process I'm talking about is pretty simple. It sounds very complicated, but it's very simple. It took me years to learn that it's actually very simple. I was taking something very simple and making it complicated. And I think that in this game, a lot of us do that. A lot of us. And I can only speak from observing the people that I've been close to in my life. You know, my family, my immediate family. I watched that process go on with them as it has gone on with me. We like to take a simple matter and make it complicated. And really, I blame that on two things. One is what I call monkey mind. You know, thoughts just rushing around in our heads. Boom, 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 boom. And they seem to overwhelm us to the point where confusion sets in as to what it is that's happening in the moment. And then words come out of our mouth, sounds that reflect those thoughts. And if the thoughts are not cohesive, well, there might be different points of view between 2, 3, 4, even 5 or more people. And sometimes that can end up in harsh words being said. So yeah, I'm going to use some new words, and I'm going to explain in a little different way some words that we have been using all along. Primarily the words consciousness and source. That's where I'm going to begin. But before we get started in that, as is my custom, I'm going to introduce my artificial intelligence sponsor. And I'll be right back after he makes his little speech. All right, in a moment.
Hello, and welcome to the Matrix Game of Life. It is the generosity of viewers like you that makes this channel possible. If you find the information provided as being beneficial, please send a thank you gift. It will be much appreciated. A PayPal link can be found in the description section of all videos. May your Matrix experience be one of health and of prosperity.
All right, let's get started. I'm going to begin by putting a graphic up that I did I've shown this before, but I'm going to leave it up for a little while so you can look at it. I'll leave it up for about a minute. I want you to look at everything that's on it and read it. And it would do you good to save it. I have 8 graphics now, I think, that are available in my drop-down box where it says show more, and they're all PNG files, and they're portable. You can, anywhere you save pictures, you can save them. They work on Android, they work on an iPhone, they work on an iPad, your television, your desktop computer, or your laptop. You can open them anywhere. They're portable. And I think, it would be good to do that because all of these graphics fit together. They do help me because there's a method to my madness, so to speak. And they all do fit together. So let me shut up here for a second and let you just look at this graphic for a minute without me yapping. All right? All right, hold on. Let me get this together. All right, I hope you got the idea. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a split screen here when we talk about this graphic. That way you don't have to be looking at this mug so big on your screen. But the graphic ought to be legible. You ought to be able to see it and read it as we discuss it. And before we get into that, like I said in my last video, I think it was L2V-025. I think what I name that? I don't even remember. Self and other? I think so. Jeez. Anyhow, what I said in that video, just 2 videos back, there's this one, and then there's that little short 4-minute one, and then there's the video where I went for an hour and 17 minutes. That's the one I'm referring to. I said if I was to name this video, not this video, this graphic, jeez. If I were to name this graphic, it would have been called Emanation. Now, I had to look at that word, and I really had to think, is that the correct word? Because this graphic shows things going like kind of from the top to the bottom, step by step. And they're really not, these steps don't happen that way. They are spontaneous. They all happen within consciousness, awareness. They never leave consciousness nor awareness. So all these steps are combined in the top step, where it says consciousness. Now I'm going to add something new. And it's rather difficult to put words to it. In fact, I've heard a lot of teachers say that if you want to talk about it, the best thing that you can do is just shut up. And I agree, because words just, they can't touch it. But you see this oval here, the top one where it says consciousness, aware. It is aware that it's aware. It's aware of being. It's very subtle. Very subtle. You cannot show me your consciousness. You cannot show me your awareness, though it's apparent. It's hiding in plain sight. You are conscious and aware, are you not? Yes, you are. The problem with this is the words. We use the word consciousness as though it's a thing, and it is not a thing. It's very subtle. It is aware of its own being, its existence. In fact, it is existence. It is existence. And being aware takes perception. So there's a very subtle perception in there. But none of this is a thing. It is, I'll have to use some analogies. Imagine the heat that is rising from your body. Nothing is really doing that. It's just happening. You can't see the heat. You don't pay any attention to it. Unless perhaps a fever sets in or you're very cold, then you're quite aware of your body heat. But generally speaking, just sitting in a chair, doing whatever it is that you're doing. You could be doing a crossword puzzle. It doesn't matter. You are emanating heat. Now, that heat in what we call a third dimension, which is just a term for measurement, it's a descriptive term for purposes of discussion. In the third dimension, that heat that emanates, radiates, same thing, kind of, from your body, are in the form of waves, heat waves. However, they're part of a spectrum of light that we cannot see. We cannot see it any more than you can see your consciousness, your awareness. You can't see that. But it's all one thing. Now, where those words become a little bit awkward, the words consciousness and source, which I've always said mean the same thing. I use them interchangeably. I didn't use source on this one because consciousness is source. The source of everything that is perceived to be happening. However, what is beyond consciousness? What is the, for lack of a better term, what is the media in which it appears and operates? it's nothing. Nothing. Nothing that can be said, described. The only thing that can be said about it is that it's dimensionless. In other words, it has no height, width, depth, center. You cannot measure it. It is immeasurable. As I said, and I'll repeat it, you can't say how large it is or how small it is, because then you have to say larger than what or smaller than what. It's nothing. It's nothing. And it is the substrate of everything that appears in it. Nothing is responsible in a sense. It doesn't do it. Nothing does. Nothing, like I went into in my last video. Nothing doesn't do anything. But all things, so to speak, appear in it. I'll use an analogy. It's a poor analogy, but I'll use it anyhow. I'll tell a little story about this, and it'll make sense, and I don't want to go on too long about this. One day I was sitting on a park bench by the river. It was a beautiful day. I was looking at the sky, and there were very, very few clouds, very few. It was mostly all blueness. And I'm just looking at the sky. I think it's, beautiful, but I was looking at the sky, and all of a sudden, something happened that I had never witnessed before. I'm looking at the sky, and I saw a cloud form. It started very, very little and faint, so to speak, but enough to catch my eye, and then it just appeared out of nowhere. Now, scientifically speaking, we would say it's the condensation, it's of water. The water evaporates and then it condenses and a cloud is formed, and that's what I was witnessing, the formation of a cloud. But it blew me away because it came out of nowhere. Where there was blue sky, all of a sudden a little cloud appeared. And I was awestruck. I had never witnessed any of that before. It was really cool. It was. I had to laugh. That's how all clouds are formed. But I saw a new one beginning. And it just appeared. Now, look at that blue sky and expand it into outer space, as far as you can imagine you can see. And then take everything out of that. Take every star and galaxy and whatever we see when we look up through telescopes, okay? Take that all away until all you have is nothing. We call it space. Space with absolutely nothing in it. And then all of a sudden, when you're looking at that nothingness, a planet appears out of nowhere. It just appears out of nowhere. You go, wow. That nothingness of empty space. Now, this is an analogy. That substrate of empty space that does nothing. There's nothing in it. It's just there. It's just there. Call it boundless and immeasurable. Unspeakable. How could you describe it? You couldn't, other than nothing. It's nothing. But a planet appeared in it. Very strange. Now that nothingness is beyond consciousness. But consciousness, how this happens is a mystery. I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. But out of that nothingness, immeasurable, boundless, not a thing, but then again, you could call it a thing. In that unbounded nothingness, consciousness emanates, it appears. I don't know any way to make that any more clear. It's like I said, the activity of the mind is thought. Well, another activity that the mind does and is capable of is imaging, imagination. We see in the mind forms. So that's like another thing that mind does. It has imagination and memory. Memory is very important. I'm going to get into that later on. It plays a big part in what's happening. This is what's happening. And nothing is doing it. It's like the apple tree apples, effortlessly. It's just, it's what is. So there's consciousness at the top of this, the top oval. That is the first emanation of nothing. Nothing is everything and everything is nothing. No, that's not a riddle. It's not important you think about that. I mean, you really can think about it. You can at least imagine it. Now, consciousness is very subtle. It arises out of nothing. It is aware of its own being and nothing else. Consciousness is eternal. It's infinite, timeless. None of this ever started. It's happening now. It's always been happening now. The concepts of present, past, and future, those are concepts. They come later. But let's get back to consciousness here. Consciousness arises out of nothing. This never began, and it cannot end. Consciousness, this thing you call nothing, it's nothing. You can't even call it existence. If that makes any sense to you. You can't even call it existence. But it's the background of all that is. However, this is where we get into the flow. I don't want to go on too long here. I might have to do a couple videos about this. I don't know. Well, let me get back to what I was saying and not meander. So out of nothing, consciousness emanates. It appears out of nothing, like that cloud I watched in the sky. Only a cloud we can see. Consciousness you can't see. You really can't describe it, although you experience it all the time. It's not, we have a sense that this consciousness is between our ears, located somewhere behind our eyes. And in a way that's true, and in another way it's not true at all. That's a paradox. Consciousness is unbounded, limitless, seamless, indivisible. Indivisible. If it's indivisible, and we say we are consciousness, what are we? Well, that's a story. And that this chart, or this graphic, explains it in a very simplified manner. What was the hardest part of this to explain was that everything, and consciousness is not really a thing, although we could call it a thing because we recognize it. To us, it's a thought which makes it a thing. We have the thought of the word consciousness, and we associate that with something that we have, which we don't. It's what we are. And the word kind of cannot express what I'm trying to say. That's why I always say words are very limiting. There's nothing that can be done about that. It would ruin the game. It would ruin the fun. But anyhow, consciousness appears out of nothing. Like that cloud in the sky appeared out of the blue. Boom. And it's aware of itself and nothing else. You can call it no thing. There's perception there because if consciousness perceives its own self, there's an element of perception, but only of itself. Now here's where the game begins. The next, which is not a step. It looks like it's steps. It says consciousness, and below it mind, and then I am, and then all those little I ams, which are the source fractals. All of these things they're not apart from consciousness. They appear, they emanate in consciousness. Consciousness does not make them appear. All of this is natural. It just is. It's you can't even say it happens because it never began. None of this had a beginning. On the right, you see it's eternal. I have it written right there on the graphic. It's eternal, and it's spontaneous. It's all happening now. It contains all concepts. It's the origin. And the next thing that what radiates out of consciousness is a thing called mind, if you want to call it a thing. You cannot show me your mind. You cannot pluck your mind out of your limited perception of where we feel like it is. Trapped behind this skin somehow. Very limited. But mind itself is limitless, immeasurable. None of this can be measured. It's all just happening out of nothing. Whoa, man. How crazy does that sound? Wait. So there's consciousness. It kind of like emanates out of nothing. And it's aware of itself, and that's all it's aware of. I'll tell you a short story. Maybe it'll make something click for you as I go on. I mentioned in my last video that there was a point in my life, this was years ago, maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago. I had a guru. There's an old saying among the gurus, when the student is ready to guru will appear. And that kind of happened. It like, I thought, oh boy, I'm on my way. But anyhow, one day I was texting back and forth. I think that's how we were doing it. I don't remember. But we were communicating on a computer. And I said something about God. This is why I still had a concept of God as being a human-like type of being. That's how long ago this was. That was a big pitfall for me. But anyhow, I mentioned God. and why, I don't know what I was talking about. I mean, then I did then. I mentioned God, and she wrote back to me. She said, God doesn't even know that you exist. I'm like, what? That almost felt insulting. She was in a different place than I was. Her perception was expanded, so to speak. She perceived things from another perspective, another point of view. I don't know why I told that story. It took up time. Geez, I'm sorry about that. But anyhow, the next thing, this all happens together, okay? It's not a chain of cause and effect. It isn't like that. It's all one thing being what it is, without an agenda. There's no agenda just yet. That comes a little later on. But the next thing that arises out of nothing is consciousness, and from consciousness there's mind. Mind is vast. It's immeasurable, and it's seamless. It has no parts. Not actually. But then something happens. Out of this thing, if you want to call it a thing, okay, rises, what did I say that the activity of mind is? The activity of mind is thought and images. A concept arose. This is all spontaneous. It's still going on. It never began and it never ends. It's always now. It's timeless. It's eternal. I'm not even going to try to explain that. We're so steeped in time that what we call our fractalized little mind, we can't grasp that in its entirety. You got to go beyond mind, so to speak, and go, oh, that's another story. Out of this mind arises in consciousness, and in consciousness, in mind arises a thought. That's the activity of mind. The I thought. What's the first letter in identification? I. It's non-dual at this point. It's like singular, but it's a thought. And as consciousness is aware of its being, mind is aware of its being, the I thought is aware of its being. And all of them come out of nothing. The I thought arises in the mind. I. That thought, I've heard it said, and if you understand it in the way it's true, the I thought is the mother of the world. And I'll explain that. Maybe not in this video, but I'll explain that. The I thought arises. And it's aware of itself. And the concept of I am, it's a perception. The concept of I am arises. So it's all spontaneous now. This doesn't happen over time. It doesn't. It's spontaneous. You can't describe it really. I mean, I'm doing the best I can with it. The I thought is aware of itself, and it says another thought, a perception arises because it's coming out of mind. This is a mind game. We're going back to its origins, which is a bad word to use because it doesn't have an origin. Actually, it's always been, so to speak. The I am, the self-identification. I told you the story of the burning bush speaking to Moses. The burning bush called itself I am that I am. But the burning bush was here speaking to something over here. That's duality. Now, I'll explain that right now. I am is a perception. It's a concept. It's actually a thought that arises in mind. In this graphic here that I did, and I do have it. It's in a drop-down box. You see right here. I'm trying to do this on a camera. I don't know how. You see right here where this explains all of that, but this is a little bit more complicated than this. As soon as there's a self-identification, I am is a self-identification. It's a name, I. Now, it could have been, I don't know what language or concept it goes on at that level, but anyhow, if I had to say, I'd say the concept that arose, the word was I am. I can only speak English. With that, I am naturally arises because I am is a self-identification. Automatically prompts a thought. There's a thing called chains of thought that attract one another. That's another story. Our whole seemingly existence is because of that. Chains of thought. But that self-identification, I, self, automatically prompts, for lack of a better word, the thought, I and other than I, self and other. Now remember, all of this is happening in consciousness, which appears in nothing. That's the backdrop of everything. Nothing is everything. But as soon as that concept of self and other than self, you are in duality, full blown. I mean, it's beginning. It isn't like it is now, and this has a lot to do with memory. Thoughts are remembered. We remember. We can't remember every thought that ever went through, appeared in our mind. But you can start remembering, and what you remember is like, wow. it's really hard to say it because it takes back to the origins of the universe, which is a thought. That's what it is. Now, I want you to look at this diagram. Just to the right of consciousness, it says reality. Now, another word for that reality is nothing. Consciousness is reality because it doesn't have any concept of itself. It's just aware that it is. It's aware of isness. It doesn't think. It doesn't do anything. And yet we are that. When mind arises in consciousness, not outside of consciousness, in consciousness, they're the same. They're like almost the same thing. They're just different kind of like levels of perception. Mind, the origin of thought activity, the origin of it, it's the background, the base, whatever you want to call it, the substrate. It's the canvas on which thoughts are painted, so to speak. And without a painter, pictures just appear. The I thought arises. The I identifies with itself. I am. And boom. Other than self concept arises, and we're in duality. Self and other than self. Good. The basis, so to speak, of good and evil, right and wrong, up and down, left and right, hot or cold, duality, concepts that have opposites. And for lack of a better word, the game, the mother of all games, is on at that point. Because the mind keeps producing thoughts, the I is perceiving them, the I am is perceiving the thoughts and the opposite kind of thoughts, and boom, a universe appears. What's the does the universe have an opposite? Does it? Yeah. No universe. It's not necessary to rack our brains over this. Once the I am perception, self-perception, that makes possible duality. It's picking up all the thoughts that are appearing in mind as an individual I am, and it's using these thoughts to form concepts, stories. Stories. What you're looking at on the screen that you think you see, this person talking to you, and you, the listener to the sounds, sense perception, mixed with thoughts, so to speak. I am one of those on the bottom, those source fractals. This is full duality. Now, how many I am little imagined by the I am, which is not a person, it's not a being, it's a thought, it's a concept, but it's aware of itself. It's like thinking of thinking. Now that makes possible duality. And that's apparent. You see me, if you were here, I would see you. Self and other than self. How many source fractals there are, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. I can imagine, like if you look at the expanse of this imagined universe and all of the civilizations that populate it, there's no number you can pick that can represent it. All points of consciousness, precipitants of consciousness that go through the same process. Mind, I am. We experience that all the time, spontaneously. We don't even pay attention to it. There could be zillions and zillions of points of consciousness, source fractals. I don't know. But as you see, when you leave the nothing, and consciousness appears, which is unbounded, these ovals that I made, they start getting smaller in size. And by the time we're down to all these fractals, all these I ams, it could be all, who knows where, they're all points of perception, points of consciousness, precipitated out of consciousness, involved in mind, involved in I am, perceiving all this duality, all of it. And none of it is what it appears to be. None of it, I'm talking about at our level, at the fractal level, nothing is what it appears to be. Nothing. Not even what we call ourself. We had no, this all happened, it's all spontaneous. It never began, it never ends, it's eternal. You can call it life. It's kind of like beyond what we usually think what life is, because we're so body-centered. We're so body-centered that we're scared to death of death. Because we can't imagine not having a body. and still being I. Well, the body didn't come until the fractalization of the I am, because that I am was singular, fractalized into what is appearing. But everything, nothing is what it appears to be, because everything is in the realm of imagination. It's all thought. It's all going on at the same time. You had no beginning, you have no end. It's not, you can't even call it a function. It's an appearance in consciousness, which is our source. Because consciousness is the source of mind, which is the source of I, which is the activity of thought. One thought is the I thought. It arises in mind. Mind doesn't think it up, it just happens. The I thought turns into I am. I am, that kind of like singularizes everything. A perception. Some people would call the I am thing right here God. Some would say, call it Jesus Christ. Some would call it Allah. There are many names for the I am. There are as many concepts of the I am as there are fractals, so to speak, of the I am. Distillations, contractions of mind, which originates in consciousness that originated in nothing. But originate is a bad word. It's the wrong word to use. There are no origins. And in the end, we're down here at the fractals. I gave a long talk about, at this point, we feel contracted. We feel bound. We feel like a hole that we try to fill. We feel incomplete. We feel separate. Separate from what? Seeking happens. People make treks to India seeking. People go to church every Sunday. What are they doing there? They're trying to. They're seeking. They're trying to get out of this concept, this idea of separateness. It's just an idea coming from limited mind, so to speak. And when you reach the seeking point, there comes a time, and it doesn't necessarily have to be while this avatar, thought-up body is still appearing. It can happen after that. There's a lot to be said about that. A reverse journey starts, so to speak, of these little I am fractals trying to get back to their original state, which is beyond mind. It's in the realm of consciousness. And if you've ever experienced it, it's contentment and happiness. It can't be explained. It cannot be explained. but it's what everybody is really searching for, and we try to fill that hole with all the wrong things, all these ideas. We get in ideas. Everything starts with an idea, because everything that appears is a thought form. And actually, we are like a dream within a dream, dreaming. It all works on memory. Memories that are inaccessible to us for the most part. But we've been through them. All of this, we already know. And because we've forgotten what we are, we feel separated and incomplete. And we're looking for unity with our self. It's the journey back. To consciousness. And the thing of it is that all of this is, there's no better way to explain it other than this mind that emanated out of consciousness, or emanates out of consciousness. I mean, it's all happening at once. They're not separate things. All this is connected. This mind falls asleep to itself, so to speak, and enters into its own imagination. And thoughts appear. The activity of the mind is thought. Surely you've imagined things. Mind falls asleep to itself and enters in to its own dream state. And dreams concepts made of the thoughts, which is its activity. Like a universe, a galaxy, a star, a planet, people. It is so magnificent that it's useless to speak about. It's absolutely magnificent. But those thoughts don't go away. They're all remembered. Some people call it the Akashic record. That's just a name for something. This is the process of it. You already know all things. You just don't remember it. We have forgotten what we are. We have forgotten what's going on. And we seek and search for answers. And actually there are no answers, because there's nobody is doing anything. There is no thinker. There is no doer. It's all a process appearing. What is what is. This is it. For us, this is it. It comes, it's nothing, appearing is everything. It's hiding in plain sight. And you are it. It's how consciousness in this process of mind, I, thought, I am, fractals, us fractals, we are like, it makes it possible for consciousness to see itself as a world. Because the mind is asleep to itself, dreaming a world. And we think it's all matter on the outside, a body looking outward, and thoughts and feelings and emotions on the inside of a body. And actually all this is happening in consciousness, and there is no inside or outside. The body's like an avatar, it's a dreamed up thing. All of this represents, all of the teachings that I gave are on level 1 of the matrix game of life, when I did the flow and the framework of the game. And I said at that time that it's a teaching instruction, it's a mirror image, so to speak, of something that's going on far more. There's no word for it. You can call it mystical, you can call it spiritual, you can call it whatever you want, but it is what it is, and this is it. There's nowhere to go. Just think of all these fractals, billions or trillions of them. Who knows? They're all in source. They're not parts. The source is not up there and we're here. This is all happening at the same time in one. Can't even call it a place because it's unbounded. It's immeasurable. All those individual minds, so to speak, which aren't individual at all, they're all points of perception. Think of all the thoughts. There's 7 billion people on this earth. Think of all the thoughts that are going on. And out of all those thoughts comes this. You can't even call it a creation. It's like an original idea is very rare. It's very rare. A fractal named Steve Jobs had an original idea, and everybody's still scrambling through his stores. But that all started with a thought. There are thoughts that attract like thoughts. And chains of thoughts are built. And so on and so forth. And it's just, this is all. I have nothing to teach, really. I am you and you are me. This is all what is. It's there's no me or you doing anything. We are a perceiver, a point of consciousness, perceiving thoughts in a very localized way. And those thoughts manifest as action, doing things. It's all thought. Matter is a concept. Solidity, it's just a concept in dream. I can say wake up. You can't wake up. If you do, if your identity falls away, other than being aware, your identity falls away. That happens if it happens, it just happens. You can't meditate your way into it. You can't pray your way into it. You can't do anything because you are not you, but you are source, and there is no you. You never were and never will be. We are imagined characters in a dream, and we're lost in the dream and we think it's real. It is real. It's a real dream. But it's all rooted in consciousness. So we just start going backwards. We're in the dream of a universe. We say we're on a planet Earth that's in a solar system called Sol that is in a galaxy, which is part of a cluster of galaxies, and that cluster of galaxies is a part of another cluster of galaxies, and on and on and on, as far as you can imagine. Everything is happening at the speed of thought, and it's always now. It's not necessary that that be understood, because there's no one to understand it. There's no one to learn it. There's no one to teach it. It's nothing appearing as everything, effortlessly. And when it emanates consciousness and mind, what can appear is unlimited, infinite possibilities. I don't know. That's another overall view of what's going on, what you are. The dream is real. The character is real. It's as though consciousness, source, decided to walk up onto the stage dressed up as the ballerina and play a role in a story. This is a story. It's all imagined. And we share in that imagination, but that's only a small part of the biggest picture. It's just too much. I don't want to talk about it anymore. It's just, wow. And so what? Really? So what? There is an element of irony in this. We all seek to wake up, and there's no seeker. Not really. And I'll close with this. Muhammad was absolutely correct when he wrote, "You are not you, but you are source." And there is no you. You never were and never will be. We're source. We're characters in a dream. Source's dream. It has its own being in nothing. And nobody's consciousness is not doing this. It just happens. It's all spontaneous. It's all eternal, timeless. All right. I gotta go. I've taken up too much of your time now. I don't even know what I said. It just sounds coming out of the mouth. All right. Have a good dream. I'll talk to you later. There's a lot more to say about stuff, but it's just words. And you can walk away right now, or you can stay. It doesn't matter, I mean, because you're not doing anything. Know thyself. It's fun. All right, folks. Later on. Bye.